Today I'm going to show you how to disassemble an HTC Sensation. I realize that this phone has been out for a while and there are quite a few videos out there already, but I had a request from a viewer who wanted to see one that was a little more detailed and also didn't have some horrible music playing in the background. So I don't have any music playing, so hopefully that won't be a problem for you. This is a little higher on the difficulty level than a lot of the phones that are out there, so it's not really that hard. It's just a matter of getting used to it. You'll see here that what I have is a non-functioning digitizer, and that is probably due to some liquid damage, which will be apparent when we open up the phone. So I can't really power it off, can't use a touchscreen or anything, and I held the power button down. It does not shut itself off, so we're just going to go ahead and pull the battery, and as long as the battery's disconnected before you, or as long as the battery's removed from the phone before you disconnect the LCD, you shouldn't have any problems as far as that goes. We'll start at the bottom of the phone here by pulling this little tab out, and that kind of releases it. If you have to, you can get a pry tool or something to open that up, and it will pry open from the bottom. And you can see he's got all kinds of interesting stuff here, some type of high capacity battery, and he's had an antenna booster in there. Go ahead and take out your SIM card, and if you have a micro SD, make sure you remove that as well. And you'll see that you have 6 Torx screws that hold this in place. And you can also tell from the label that this phone has been disassembled before. Apparently the customer tried to fix it himself, and that did not work out. So we're going to figure out what's going on here. And just since I have it in front of me, I'll go ahead and take it all the way down beyond the LCD so you can see how these are removed. So once you get these 6 Torx screws out of the back of the phone, out of the housing, you will have to remove some clips that go around the side. There's a plastic assembly that goes over the 2 separate PCB boards, one on the top and one on the bottom. So if you just look around the perimeter here, you'll see a whole bunch of little plastic clips that you have to disconnect. There's one here at the top, and you'll see here that I begin to pull it up a little bit, and wherever you run into resistance, it should be pretty apparent where these clips are. Just be careful right there. You can see I kind of got under the volume cable a little bit, and you want to be really careful about the volume cable on this phone. Fortunately, it is modular, but if you tear it, you're going to have to find another one to replace it, or you have no volume function. Same thing with the power button. That's the thing that HTC likes to do, is glue the power button cables and the volume control cables to the housing of the phone, although they're also connected to the PCB board. So be really careful when you remove those, because they, as you know, they don't take a lot of use and abuse before they just get torn completely off. So you'll see here I'm working around the top and removing this clip right here. That's what most of them look like. You have to pull these off, and then you might run into a little bit of adhesive underneath that's holding it together. And just very slowly working my way around, make sure I don't get anything snagged, and of course don't go in too far with your tool. You don't want to cut anything that you cannot see. Okay, and this will eventually just kind of lift up, and you can pull the whole back piece off. And then inside, you'll see here that the liquid damage indicator has turned red, so we definitely got some water or something inside of here. And take your heat gun. What you want to do is heat up this metallic tape, which is down here covering a couple of your FFC cables and also an antenna wire. And HTC loves to do this with antenna wires. You'll see here when I remove this thing here, you can just kind of peel this back. Do not peel it off of the flex cable that you see in the back of the battery compartment, because it will tear that cable. But you just want to get off of these here, and you'll see you've got your antenna pop connector here in the center, and then you also have your 2 FFCs that have to be released in order to disconnect the LCD. And I'm going to go ahead and take the whole antenna wire out. There are actually 2, one on each side. So we're going to take both antenna wires out, and they are plugged into both of those boards. And then you want to just very gently open these up, and you can kind of, I started to go inside of this with something, but you can almost just slide these out with your hand. Don't poke a hole in them. This probably is not a great tool to use for it. You can actually just kind of slide these out, or you can grip them with your pry tool. Just pull them back, and that'll be the LCD that you're looking at, this wide one. And then on the right hand side is the cable, flex cable for the buttons on the bottom of the screen. Not really physical buttons, but the home settings and so forth. So we've got another antenna wire here we're going to disconnect. Take note of the channels that these sit down inside, because you want to make sure you get them back into their proper orientation. And once those are off, we can go ahead and move over to, I think we went with the top here. Oh no, we've got a clip down here at the bottom. So you'll see this slides in this board, and the easiest way to get this out is just kind of push the board down, or up rather, actually, from out behind this clip. And once you unhook that, you'll be able to slide it out from this other one that would be on the bottom of the screen now. and there's maybe a little bit of adhesive under that cable, but we're going to try to probably keep both of these boards together. No reason to really separate them. And if you go up here, you'll see there is one silver screw that holds that top board in place, so make sure you remove that before you start prying anything. And then if I remember correctly, you will run into a little bit of adhesive under this one, so you might want to hit it with the heat gun. But mostly, pay attention to these volume buttons. This one didn't come off the way that I wanted it to. You really want to heat this up and get completely under the entire volume button assembly. You'll see that the flex cable actually separated from a little tab that goes underneath it. If you can pull this all off at once, you can actually leave it plugged into the top half of the phone, and that way you don't have to worry about one less cable to remove. And you can see here I actually pulled the cable off. So we'll end up taking the whole thing out. Again, be very careful. These are delicate, and if you scratch or scrape them, they're not going to work when you put the phone back together. Okay, so you can see now that the whole half of it basically came off. I meant to get underneath the whole thing. This is just a little cover actually that goes over the actual cable itself. So now we want to very carefully get under this, and this stuff is slightly flexible, but try to keep it as straight as possible when you remove it, and watch out for the buttons. Those things just love to fall off. They have a little bit of adhesive on them, but when you're dealing with a foam that's been wet before, that adhesive has usually been weakened, so you don't want to lose those little buttons. They're hard to get a hold of. Okay, and you'll see that kind of came out. There were some clips holding the top piece on. I don't think I was really had to show you how, but they do unclip from that logic board on the top. If you inspect the perimeter, you'll see where they're at. And you also see that the digitizer plugs in a very awkward configuration here. So if you want to take a snapshot of that, just take a look at how this goes in from the inside. It's very unusual, and putting it back together is kind of a pain. But if you open this one up, this will slide out. There's generally some adhesive under that big square, but this one, of course, is not sticking anymore. So I've got this completely separated from the rear housing. So you got your LCD and your bottom button set, and what we're going to do, those control the buttons at the bottom: home, settings, back, and the search button. So you have to be really careful because that ribbon cable actually runs right underneath the digitizer. So we're going to heat this up and pry it, but be very careful at the bottom of the phone. This reminds me a lot of the first generation Galaxies, where they actually have the tape right up against the digitizer. So if you're not careful, you'll slice right through it. Remember, everything is pretty much on the right hand side of the phone at the bottom half if you were looking at it from the front. So we want to basically start prying from what would be the left-hand side of the phone if you were looking at it upright, because at the bottom you don't have to worry too much about cutting through anything. But you'll see that I just kind of get this started eventually, and it's a little tricky to get under here. I don't like to use metal to pry on glass, especially painted surfaces, but on this one it's really hard to get underneath, so I just went under this enough so that I can get it started. And then of course we'll move over to a plastic pry tool, because we don't want to scrape the paint on the back of this, and we definitely don't want to shatter it, because there's a possibility this is still a good digitizer. So I'm just going to kind of work my way around here, and this is the most time consuming part probably, because you want to make sure you break through the adhesive on the lens. And in order to replace the touchscreen, you will have to at least partially remove the LCD, because HTC almost always puts the flex cable for the touchscreen underneath the LCD, almost as if they were sabotaging you so that you would not repair your phone. But you'll see how we get around it here. Just a lot of heat and a lot of patience, and be very careful, and you will be able to remove the the lens from the LCD. You can buy this whole piece as one part. It's going to cost you about another 25 bucks, but if you wanted to buy the LCD already installed with the digitizer, I think they run about $50, $52. Whereas if you just want to replace the glass, that's going to set you back about 20, and I think the LCDs now are down to like 25 bucks. So definitely worth repairing, if you ask me. This is a good phone, and it's hard to find good phones for T-Mobile. They don't have the type of selection that the larger carriers do, but they do have the more competitive price plans. So a lot of people like T-Mobile for that reason. Okay, so you'll see here what I'm doing is I'm trying to open this up, and I'll focus the camera here shortly so that you can actually observe or see what I'm describing here. This little white cable that goes right behind the glass, and you have to make sure you're on top of it, not underneath, because again, you can slice through it pretty easily. So bear with me for a minute. I'll put this thing into focus, and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So just inside there, you should see a little flat white plastic, probably about maybe ½ an inch wide at the most, quarter to ½ an inch wide. And you'll see I'm actually in between the digitizer and that little plastic piece, just very carefully trying to break the adhesive seal around the edges and staying away from that cable as much as possible. You can see I almost got under it there just trying to focus on the camera for a minute, and I started getting the pry tool underneath the cable. We want to stay away from that. And from here, if you need to, apply a little more heat, and we're just going to go just under the edge of the screen here and work our way around along the edges until all the adhesive is released and we get to the top. And at the top, of course, you want to watch out for the flex cable. And I think I'm just cutting some of the glue. Some of the adhesive here is pretty sticky, and they have a little black tape that will kind of work against you. So if you just cut through the tape and not through any of the cables, you'll be okay. But of course, be very careful when you're doing that. Make sure you know what you're cutting through. And you see I'm applying a little more heat. When you get to the very top, you don't want to just pry it open. Make sure you very slowly pull this apart and put as much heat on there as you need to. And there's some more of that annoying tape. I'm going to cut through that one. And we'll clean that up before we put the lens back in, of course. You see it's very slowly peeling apart. Again, if it seems too sticky, just hit it with a little bit of heat, but this looks like it's probably going to start breaking the adhesive seal here. Just a second. And just a quick note, be careful. You don't want to apply a lot of direct heat to the LCD itself, so be real careful if you're working around here. It doesn't take much to damage them, and you can always heat from the opposite side of the glass, and that will keep the LCD out of your direct line of fire. Okay, and you can see from this point, you have access to the cable, but you cannot unplug it because it runs behind the LCD. This really is annoying. Makes it kind of a pain to work with these phones. There's a little rubber piece also here. Make sure you keep track of that. That goes right on top of that little cable. And then you have this black junk around the edges here that tends to get in the way. If you want to try to leave it on there and work with it, you can. And there, of course, is the cable that I was talking to. But I would recommend heating the LCD from the back side where the metal panel is. You definitely don't want to put direct heat onto the LCD itself. That can be a bad thing. And once we heat it up, we're going to try to get underneath this. You can kind of peel that little cable out of the way. And we're just going to very gently go under. Now, this is where it gets really tricky because you cannot apply much pressure to an LCD. They crack very easily. It's not like working with the digitizer on the front where they have a little bit of strength. The LCDs, I just can't emphasize how much or how fragile these things are. So you want to keep it as flat as possible. And what I'm doing here is just trying to cut through the adhesive that's underneath the LCD. I'm not applying any actual pressure to the LCD itself. At least no more than necessary. And they do have a very small amount of flexibility, but you've got to be really, really careful on these. Not quite as fragile as an iPhone, but still very easy to break. So you can see I'm just kind of cutting through, and if you have to, you can add some Goo Gone or something else to your pry tool, and that will kind of help you slice through here. But again, there's really no substitute for patience and being very careful with what you're working with. If you keep at it, you will get through here, and hopefully be lucky enough not to break the adhesive, or excuse me, not to break the LCD. So once I start to pull this out a little bit, I'll take something with a little more surface area, like a credit card, or this is a SIM card that was punched out. And that way you're putting an even amount of pressure on the entire LCD and not just on one spot. That's what we want to be really careful about. And also be careful when you're prying. If your hand slips, you can have some problems. So you want to control the amount that you're pushing here. And at this point, you'll see where I'm raising up on the LCD. There's only so much room that you have to pull it up, and you could actually slide the digitizer cable out if you wanted to. But I'm going to go ahead and completely remove the LCD so that you can see that it actually can be removed and reinstalled without breaking it. Again, you're going to run into some more adhesive on the opposite side, so it's just a matter of getting through that glue. And once this is opened up, you'll be able to actually see where it is. And some manufacturers like to put just tons and tons of adhesive under the LCD. It's almost as if they're worried that the impact from a phone falling might cause it to flop around in there and break. I'm not sure why so much adhesive is necessary, but you see I'm getting under here now, and I'm just breaking through that last bit of adhesive on the far side very carefully, and then we can go ahead and remove this. And putting it back together is pretty much the reverse of this process. I'm going to let the video run for a little bit longer here. Trying to remember why, actually. I thought I was pretty much done at this point. You can see I'm just trying to get between the adhesive and the LCD. You just don't want to yank this thing out. It will definitely break if you're not careful. Okay, and you can see some of that tape kind of got left behind. I'm not really concerned with that. We can clean this up later. Take all this black stuff around from the edges and remove it, so we'll have a nice clean surface, and we'll add some new adhesive. But what I wanted to do, this is why I let the video run. So what we want to do is make sure at this point that we have not broken the LCD, because you don't want to waste your time putting the whole phone back together if the LCD is broken. So it's actually possible to plug this FFC back into the bottom PCB board. So we'll go ahead and plug this in, and you'll see how I can kind of get the battery into the right position and get this thing to turn on and make sure it's working before we fully reassemble the phone. So if you get that plugged in, and you want to of course set it in a direction where you can actually see the screen, and if we're really careful, we can actually match up the connections on the battery, kind of hold that into place, and then you can hit your power button on the top here, and that will still power up the LCD, and we can make sure that it is showing signs of life and hasn't shattered. And it's going to be a little hard to see here because of the lighting, but you see I do have a screen here that is turning on and it's starting up. Of course, I won't be able to test the digitizer until we plug that back in. But at this point, we're pretty certain that either the digitizer has a problem or there's something else that's causing the touchscreen not to work properly. And we have a very dim LCD right now also, probably because I have the sensor facing down towards the surface that I'm working on. But we'll go through and check this, and if it's not working for some reason, of course, we will be getting a new LCD. But the main thing is we don't have any cracks, no colors running, so we're pretty confident that the LCD has been preserved and can be reused. Once we get this thing started back up, of course, it's going to be a little tricky to power it off without just pulling the battery because I don't have a touchscreen. But you can see we do actually have an image here, and the LCD is operating, and we'll be back with the reassembly video soon. Thanks for watching.